And we find ourselves, like, I've had to write letters to like some of the Project Europe team's parents to say this thing they're doing is great and is potentially going to be like one of the things that like has a huge impact on the future, so that this kid could say no to the position they had at a good university, or the place they had at a good university. So I think it's just like, it's culturally not, it's definitely accepted, it's not like a taboo thing to build a company, but it's there isn't permission to do it in the most audacious way.
What happens when a single DM turns into a continent-wide founder movement? In our episode today, we're joined by Kitty Mayo, CEO of Project Europe, the new under-25 founder fund created by Harry Stebbings and backed by 200 plus of Europe's top entrepreneurs. Before launching Project Europe, Kitty spent 5 years at Entrepreneur First, helping hundreds of founders build from zero. Now, she's on a mission to find the next generation of Europe's best entrepreneurs. In the next 45 minutes, we talk about why young founders need cultural permission as much as capital, what Kitty looks for beyond the pitch deck, and how to build a movement without HQs, playbooks, or limits. And to all of you out there, don't forget, if you find this valuable, then don't just listen to this podcast, but also subscribe to our free newsletter. We release this every Tuesday morning with a rundown on all things entrepreneurship, and every Thursday morning together with our podcast episode and an exclusive from our guest. Visit us under followthegradient.io. And now, enjoy.
Kitty, take us inside the early days. You get a LinkedIn message from Harry. You're on garden leave. You don't believe the message. You told me that you even thought it was fake, and I'd loved about it. How did this turn into Project Europe in a matter of weeks?
It's very good questions. I was in early this year, I was kind of beginning to think about like, what should I be doing with the rest of my life? And I spent a long time in sort of early stage talent investment, and it's where I loved working. And I was exploring different options. I was thinking about, on one hand, going to like do talent work and help companies hire, and on the other hand, thinking about maybe, I don't know, throwing it all in and becoming a painter or something. And then one Friday afternoon, I just got this LinkedIn connection request from Harry. I didn't know Harry before at all, and I actually screenshotted it and sent it to my team in my old job saying, "Lol, guys, I've made it. Harry Stebbings wants to be friends with me." And then I read the message that was associated with it saying like, "Hey, Kitty, would love to get your thoughts on something." And I was like, "This is bizarre. Like, I don't know this guy, but of course, like, it's Harry Stebbings. I'll have a call with him." Hopped on the call Friday afternoon, like 5:30, 6 p.m. Harry started telling me about, he was like, me and some of my friends have got like really, really, really pissed off that everyone is so down on Europe and we want to do something about it. So lots of us have like come together and we want to like, set something up to invest in the next generation of European founders. And he was like, I've asked around and like your name keeps coming up. And so I just thought I'd reach out and ask if you wanted to do it. And this was like 15 minutes into the call. And I was thinking, like, first of all, like maybe this is one of those deep fakes where someone makes, I mean, Harry would be quite easy to deep fake, right? There's so much Harry material out there.
Yes.
And and also like he's got such like perfect delivery. Like, is this an AI? Is this a real person? And so, but I was like, just in case, I'll continue the conversation like I'm talking to a real human being. And he was like, anyway, think about it. Let me know, because like I think it could be an awesome thing. And I came downstairs and I said to my boyfriend, I was like, I think someone out of the blue has just like reached out and offered me like the opportunity that I've been dreaming about. Like it was honestly, it felt like divine intervention. We met a few times, had dinner the following week and spoke more about it. And I realized how earnestly serious he was about doing something like proper. And also I really got a sense of the people who were already behind this. It just felt like the most surreal, like wonderful thing for someone just to say, look, we've got all the best founders in Europe and they all want to invest and it's ready to go. Do you want to take it? And honestly, the dinner I had with him, he was selling me hard. And I was like, but this is one of the great things about Harry. He is so high conviction so quickly. Hopefully he's got a good sense of people, but it was, then I had a couple of, I'd already handed in my notice and I had a few weeks between sort of rolling up my last job and starting with Harry. And yeah, it was crazy.
And on this craziness, I mean, the launch was huge, like 14,000 followers in a day, thousands of applicants. And you were literally on a mountain, I think in Georgia, if I'm not mistaken, when it happened. So this was running, and you basically, I'm not even sure whether you had Wi Fi. What did that week actually feel like behind the scenes?
It was, I mean, it was, I think my boyfriend could attest to the fact that it was a real roller coaster. So much excitement. And then like quite a lot of, oh my God, this is actually really quite like serious, because
Oh, now I
I
have to do
think,
something.
because also I think like when you start, like usually when you start something, you like things start small and you like gradually build them up, and you gradually build credibility, and you like gradually build voice, and you gradually build like attention. But this is completely the opposite way around. Like it came out of nowhere and immediately was everywhere. And I don't know. I think maybe this is a bit sort of like imposter syndrome of me, but you kind of like, for me, it's always been quite valuable to have like earned things and to have really like worked from the bottom up, and to know that everything that you have as a result of the work you've done. And this was really like, this crazy opportunity had been handed to me on a plate. And then out of nowhere, it was suddenly like the biggest thing happening on like that part of the internet. I had a real like, oh my God, like this is, I've got, it was my thing to lose rather than my thing to win, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
But it was amazing.
Yeah.
It was also, I mean, again, like Harry is, he moves fast and he moves like decisively. And I mean, I hadn't actually officially started the job. I wasn't meant to start for another 2 weeks. I was on holiday in the mountains, as you said, with no internet. And then suddenly everything, my phone was just exploding. I had like 2,000 LinkedIn connection requests in an hour. And you know, I was a quiet unknown on the web before. And,
Not
but
anymore.
I had, yeah, not anymore. But it was, but I mean, what was so exciting was that obviously it had touched on something that really mattered to lots of people.
Mhm.
And the reception, like if this was something that wasn't wanted, then the reception wouldn't have been the same. And so it was, yeah, it was overwhelming and like hugely exciting.
Absolutely. But on this imposter syndrome, it's maybe you didn't do anything yet for this Project Europe, but you did a ton, because he asked around and he found many people probably who would have loved this opportunity, but he found you and he found the spark in you, and so you actually built up already before, and that is just now a new project. So I wouldn't say that you started from zero. So
Actually,
just to say.
a friend of mine sent me a meme, and I mean, if I knew anything about football, I'd be able to tell you who the footballer is, but I've got no idea. But
Mhm.
it says, some people say it only took me 6 seconds to score for Arsenal. Then, like, actually, it took me my entire life, and so that's kind of
Exactly.
it was like a very well timed meme.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah,
No,
it's true.
exactly. Yeah.
And once now the dust has settled in the meantime, you were in the middle of this big European experiment. And let's now talk about what you guys are really trying to solve. I mean, you've said that you want to change the narrative around Europe as a place for innovation. So when you look at the ecosystem here in Europe now, today, what is kind of holding founders back or holding startups back who want to really do something?
The easy answer is, I guess, permission. Jade, who I'm building Project Europe with, and I talk about this a lot. It feels like there are many different things that we get permission to do, like the most audacious things from. It can be, your sort of like your family and what they encourage you to do. It can be what your peers are doing. It can be what people who are ahead of you in life tell you is possible. Actually, young founders in Europe don't have a heap of permission to do these things, whereas it's so much more normalized in the US for good and bad reasons. I think there's actually kind of like a necessity to hustle for yourself, and it's also a hustler culture, and like entrepreneurial culture is like really celebrated at like all levels across the country, and that's just not really the case in Europe to the same degree. And we find ourselves like, I've had to write letters to like some of the Project Europe team's parents to say this thing they're doing is great and is potentially going to be like one of the things that like has a huge impact on the future, so that this kid could say no to the position they had at a good university, or the place they had at a good university. So I think it's just like, it's culturally not, it's definitely accepted. It's not like a taboo thing to build a company, but it's there isn't permission to do it in the most audacious way. And I think this is a huge part of what we're trying to do. And this is why we make a big thing of like telling the stories of the founders we're working with, to kind of glorify and celebrate these like big, bold moonshots. And I mean, I used to be a high school teacher back in the day. And something that was I always found so striking was that outcomes of children in classes was like very rarely determined by the quality of the teachers they had and the quality of the lessons. It was like so often determined by the things that were going on at home. The things their parents were encouraging them to do, like were their parents sitting with them as they did their homework, were their parents talking to them about the things they wanted to do after school, were their parents around. And hopefully eventually we'll be able to actually like go even further down the pipeline and actually start educating parents about how to nurture future entrepreneurs, because it's so obviously like the culture in which and the environment in which these like young people grow up in has a huge impact.
And is that also the reason why you concentrate on the young founders until 25? Because you still can have so much impact to then have them have the bigger impact? Or why did you make that kind of boundary of age?
I mean, that there are various different reasons, and 25 is like a somewhat arbitrary age, and it would accept people who are like 26. We're not looking at birth certificates, etc. But it's young founders, people at the beginning of their career, and multiple different reasons. One, because like the further back you go in someone's trajectory, I guess, the more a small like change
Hmm.
has an impact on the long-term outcome. And the other reason is because it's like that time where you have like you have the most plasticity over what you're going to become, and where your environment has probably the biggest impact on that. Like we're all pretty like fluid the whole way through our 20s and who we're going to become, but like most fluid that stage. Um, Especially people who are thinking about, do they go to university? Where do they go to university? What peer group do they want to put themselves in? Um, and so what we really want to do is create essentially the peer group these people are looking for, where they can be surrounded by other people who they're like the thing they're doing, like their sort of act of like extreme ambition and audacity and craziness is totally normal in that group of people. So to fight the fight of doing the thing while also fighting against the culture that's telling them that it's not possible. I don't know. I think it matters that they are all in the same social context, the same age. They can go fully into it. And something I'm really noticing with early career builders in Europe, they've kind of they've experienced it of the builder ecosystem. They don't think of themselves as like Swedish founders. They think of themselves as founders, and they've grown up just consuming San Francisco builder culture. And it's not the fact that it's in the US. It's not like that. That's not the stuff that
Mm.
matters to them. The thing that matters to them is they've seen a group of people who have dedicated their lives like fully to doing something great, and these founders want to be able to go full in to like they want their fun and they want their work and they want everything to be like all together. They want to be surrounded by people who care about these things too. And it matters so much that that cohort is that group of people for
Mm.
them. And when you're under 25, you can dedicate your entire life to it. When you're like, I can't dedicate my entire, I wouldn't be able to just, I mean, I kind of do. I've got a very patient boyfriend, but it's harder the further along you get. And it kind of also breaks the illusion if you have people, not, well, it doesn't break the illusion, it kind of breaks the magic, I guess, if you've got other people who aren't fully in it. And so creating this like perfect ecosystem where everyone is obsessed really, really matters. And then I guess the final reason is if you want to have a real change in Europe, it has to be like bottom up, like a grassroots change, and it'll gradually filter through. And so in 10 years' time, these founders will be mentoring the next generation who will have aged 10 or 11, been inspired by the stuff they'd seen these founders building.
Yeah, so that you kind of need to do this huge effort of building up role models or a first generation of role models who had these crazy stories or who are really impressive, and then the future generations can look up to them and can learn from them, right? And they get social proof.
Exactly.
There is the phrase out there, Europeanism of trying to find conflict between things. And you've been vocal about that. What do you mean by that? And how does it show up in how we here in Europe build or fund startups?
It's a good question. I think there's just Europe that has like a really strong fact-based culture, which is excellent because it means you have low levels of fraud and corruption. And if someone says something, you can usually assume it to be true. But it means that actually like often like optimism kind of exists in this space where you can't prove it factually. And so we're kind of like uncomfortable having these like open-ended optimistic statements. And it means actually we're quite often like more prone to being like pessimistic in that you can survive, you can find reasons why things aren't going to be the case. You can find conflicts, and you can find sort of, like parameters in pessimism. And so there is this like European mentality where like, when you see something new, you think about reasons that you can think through the different ways in which it can fail, and you can sort of knock it, because actually being optimistic and sort of thinking about things which aren't necessarily true yet feels like a deeply uncomfortable thing to do. And so like that was there was a bit of that when Project Europe first was launched, of like, well, if Project Europe's this, surely that it's trying to compete with this thing. And like it was, I don't know, that they're kind of, I guess like we can be slightly uncomfortable with, I guess, like open-ended optimism. And it feels more comfortable culturally to try and find fault with things and try and find reasons to succeed. But actually, I mean, this has kind of changed. Maybe my echo chamber has changed, but even in the last 6 or 7 months, I've noticed like a massive change in European self-perception. Um,
Hmm.
and it used to be like, I mean, even last year it was quite cool to just talk trash about Europe. And I really have like there's a really special kind of like contempt I have for Europeans who love knocking Europe, who've like left Europe and they loved talking about like all the bad things in Europe. Because I mean, if you're from somewhere, you should try and make it better, right? Yeah, sorry, Melanie.
There's a special place in hell for this kind of people.
Yeah. If you're from somewhere, you should do your best to make that little bit of the world a better place, rather than just running away from it and seeking
Complaining
higher
about
ground.
it. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, on this narrative change, I think we also see that. I see that when I speak with people, and I'm very happy about it. And I think we need to even change this narrative more. You've spent hundreds of hours meeting founders across Europe. Whenever I check your LinkedIn or X, I feel you're in another exciting city in Europe. Once in Greece, once in Stockholm, the other day then in Zurich, where we also met. You've interviewed over 500 founders in the first months. What specific signals make you think this person will really change the world? And I really want to back.
It's a really good question. For me, the thing that matters so much is earnestness. And by earnestness, I mean having like a clear and demonstrated will to make this thing happen that is like deeply intrinsic. Um, and all of the founders we're working with have been working on something, and often something that's very similar to the thing they're working on now since they were kids. It's not that they've heard that there's this like cool new job called being a CEO, and they've just thought like, I want that on my LinkedIn, I'm going to build that. And I do meet lots of those kind of people who they've seen that increasingly being a founder is a high status role.
Lifestyle founders.
Lifestyle founders. And so for me, like that earnestness is the most important thing, and that deep intrinsic motivation. And interestingly, all of our founders are building things which are not necessarily like super, super hyped. They're not building in like really, really hot spaces where everyone's building like some version of the thing they're doing. They're building stuff that their vision for the future is a direct outcome of their long-term obsession and sort of like involvement in the specific idea or technology. And so it's not like they've got like, there's this idea of, people like love talking about non-consensus takes, and there are these sort of acceptable non-consensus takes that everyone can have. Like the views that these founders have of the future are wild, and like so the product of their own like deep thought on the topic, kind of in isolation of the rest of the world in quite a brilliant way. And then I'd say that there's this other characteristic that is true of all of the Project Europe founders, which is they'll always talk to you on a level. And I know that sounds like a funny heuristic, but this is true of all the brilliant people I know. They'll never talk up to you in kind of like a sycophantic or sort of status seeking way. They'll never patronize you or condescend you or overwhelm you with information. They'll always very, very quickly like rationalize like who are you, index kind of like
Hmm.
how you might think, and they're able to like very, very easily communicate the thing that's important to them. And like this tells me two things. It tells me, one, that they have good intuition. They understand the people around them, and they can understand how to tell their story best to the audience they're talking to. And two, they have like a deep mastery of the thing they're talking about. they're not trying to baffle you with big words. They're not trying to overwhelm you with information that makes them sound impressive. They know the thing they're talking about so well that they can very, very easily distill the information that matters. And so, I mean, I know they're two quite high level things. Like obviously different founders have very different traits. But yeah, like earnestness and that stuff like that. That ease of communication is super important.
And how do you balance also, because you said like they're also obsessed and they have a focus and very high agency, and the founders who are building who have been building let's say brain computers interfaces since age 13, you have them, but how do you also then compare that with having the flexibility to actually pivot and not stick to this kind of product and be super like, I need to do this product, otherwise it doesn't work, because this pivot and this flexibility and adaptability is also what is needed to actually become this world players.
Yeah, it's an interesting one and a tough one. I think like when the founders focus is on the technology first, like there is obviously less flexibility around
Mhm.
what the product becomes, but there's a lot more. There is still flexibility around like how that is productized and to whom it's sold. And actually, so interestingly, I can't go into like huge detail, but among the hardware teams, we've got quite a few. They've all over the last all of them over the last 2 or 3 months have really sort of like changed in the way they're approaching the problem, the market, the first product they launch. And so actually I've been surprised to see how adaptable these things are. And you have the one sort of like the one sort of continuous force, which is the development of the technology. But
Mhm.
actually like where that ends up being applied, like does actually vary a lot more than I'd expected it to.
And this is probably also sorry, go
No,
ahead.
that's kind of, I'd finish it.
Yeah. This is probably also one of the things to do as a successful founder, to have this flexibility and adaptability. So besides the fact that you said like there are also these lifestyle founders or founders who just want to become CEOs, what are other mistakes that you see early builders in Europe repeat that block them from actually breaking through?
Good question. I think, I mean, the biggest one is just like not talking to enough people. I know everyone says that all the time, but I think often when founders are deep down uncertain that the thing they're doing is the right thing to do, they'll avoid seeking information that could validate or invalidate that thesis. And so I meet lots of founders who've got ideas that make sense on paper, like academically they work, and academically there's like some need for them. But like they and I both know that if that thing made sense, it would exist in the world already. And it's not such a brilliant and such a unique idea that like thousands of people wouldn't have had it already. And the thing they haven't done is actually like tested that idea by talking to anyone about it. And like often like they're the founders who you meet kind of like the conversations when you probe, you're met with brittleness, you're met with defensiveness. And sometimes on those calls I'm like, gosh, maybe I really don't understand this. And then you actually realize it's not that, it's more that they haven't got new information to share. They haven't got, when you ask them about risks, they want to like defend the risks rather than say, yeah, that is a risk, but what we've learned is this, and like we're carrying on to try and like learn more about this domain. But yeah, like it's I think that is probably the most common one. And I think the other big not problem, but like a big mistake I see is people thinking they want to build a venture backable business when they don't really want to build a venture backable business at all. They want to build like a nice, obviously not all businesses have to be venture backable, but people who've built, I don't know, like a really, really successful GPT wrapper. And something I see a lot is you meet lots of people in the TikTok native generation,
Mhm.
she says, making herself sound very old, who understand the mechanics of going viral. And they've been able to build like a GPT wrapper type product that really targets like a specific user segment. Often these are like study tools for high schoolers, for example, and they know how to go viral. They know how to get everyone using this tool, and they can actually commercialize it very, very quickly. And they may have, I don't know, like 20K MRR for this like simple product. And they think that the next step, that they think that this is going to be something that they'll continue to build and turn into a Facebook type, like a meta size business, but they don't necessarily have a clear sense of like what the longer term play is or what the bigger product they want to build to is. And they don't necessarily have a huge interest in doing that, but they kind of think that to be an entrepreneurship, you have to raise VC funding. Um, and this is a mistake as well, because like for us, it matters so much more, like, not what they're doing now, but what they're kind of like, what the longer term goal is. Yeah, these hustlers, they should just keep hustling, and they should try and like not raise any venture funding and try and keep as much of it for themselves as possible.
Absolutely.
Where do you think that comes from? Because we heard this so many times here at the podcast, this entire thing that people really want to build like this crazy VC backed business. And even sometimes the VCs themselves say, hey, what you are doing totally makes sense, but it's not a VC case, and that's totally fine. It's where do you think this bias towards having that crazy VC case and building that up comes from?
It's a good question. I mean, I think probably VCs and promoting. I mean, it's kind of our job to promote that. You should try and do the highest ambition, biggest thing, because like we've got an understanding of the power law. We want as many people to be like working to those goals as possible. And so, I mean, if you exist on like that part of Twitter or sort of in the venture ecosystem on LinkedIn, like that's it's the one legible path forward, because this whole like ecosystem operates with VCs telling founder stories and founders sort of talking about like their stories of fundraising. So I guess probably like, a lot of it comes from that, and then also it's a way of making a quite uncertain, chaotic journey seem a bit more structured. You've got like the nice timeline of you raise your pre-seed round, then you've got like then you see like you've got like a nice timeline and some fixed goals, and then you raise your seed round and blah blah blah. It feels like a nice structured process, and then finally, I think it's you get validation if you're in the early stages of building something and it's you against the world and you're just like doing this thing and no one said this is a good idea, but like maybe you care about it. Like it's quite hard to sustain yourself. But if someone says, look, here's like 1.5 million, like we believe in you, then like it's a huge amount of validation. Then you're probably far more prepared to go all in on that thing. But so it's probably I'm talking myself around it. It's probably more like that final point. Having the validation and having the backing of someone is one, it's sort of like, minimizes that sense of like, should I actually be doing this thing? But also it's a bit like signing up for a marathon. Like you've got like that like dedication, you've got that external push as well, and someone else who's going to be holding you accountable and calling you up and like asking you why things aren't going well if they're not going well.
I want to talk briefly about the kind of network or the ecosystem you guys are building up, and because you find founders, builders, you bring them together across the continent. For instance, a couple of weeks ago, you guys did, for example, a road trip with a Volvo through Sweden to meet the Lavoie team, which is a Swedish team you have recently backed, and you don't have a central headquarter. You meet oftentimes in other founders' offices, host co-work sessions. What have you learned from operating in this way, which also other teams or foundations who want to build something up could copy?
It's a really good question. So one thing I've learned is it's actually really, really tiring. It's really nice having a routine because you can go to the gym in the mornings and you can have food in the fridge and you can see your loved ones. So that's the downside. I'd say that's like the only downside. I think the upside is that your surface area increases like so dramatically. And Jade and I always say that now information is increasingly abundant and anyone can build the bots that scrape the internet to figure out like who's building what when. Actually your unit of scale as the person whose job is to like connect people is like how many friends you're making. Working the way we do, like we're forced to make friends because we have to beg, steal and borrow office spaces. We have to you're always out and about. People are always excited to meet you when you're visiting their city. And so like that's been a big learning. And actually, like the other thing is, rather initially we thought about doing things in like quite a structured way and doing like formal dinners and doing things in kind of the way things are done in the VC ecosystem. But we realized that actually when you do things in like the established way, people meet you in the established way, and you end up like not really building like real relationships at all. You end up sort of just being like, okay, hi, I'm an ambassador of this thing called Project Europe, and they become an ambassador of their thing, and you end up having a business meeting. And if you want to actually make friends, you have to do things which are unexpected and things where both of you end up like coming out of yourselves and not being in the just your position as like, I don't know, whatever your job title is. And so doing things like, and as you said, with this road trip with Nils, the founder of Lavoie, we went and had tea with his grandparents on their farm. And like, and then we were in a car with him for 5 hours. He was like absolutely grinding, working away as I was dodging headlights on the highway. Like we'll have like a lifelong bond now.
Mhm.
It was like such a special moment. I'll always ask after his grandparents. They'll ask after us. But by doing things like that, you end up with far better relationships, and it feels like you're already like establishing the founding myths of businesses, relationships, etc. And Jaden and I quite often do silly things like we went swimming in the ice river in Munich with a group of engineers, and we started doing these early morning walks. We did one in Zurich, and these like random people, like great people will show up, and it's really fun. And so I guess 2 learnings. One, it's exhausting. No, 3 learnings. One, it's exhausting. 2, it's a great way of making lots of friends. And 3, when you're constantly changing your way of working, you end up doing unexpected fun things that actually build like a far better connection. Um, and yeah, I mean, the number of friends we've made in the last 6 months is unreal.
And zooming out a little bit, this is, I feel like, also ultimately about shifting the ambition profile of Europe, doing things differently and not the way how they have been done in the past. In one of your quotes, you said, all founders should spend time in the valley, absorb it, then get over it. So coming back to a point that we also mentioned before about how this narrative is also changing and also for the good, what should Europe learn from Silicon Valley and what should it unlearn in order to create its own stories?
Really good question. So I've thought about this a lot over the last few years. I think the thing that we should unlearn, I'll start with that, is that you have to wait until you get to San Francisco to start being ambitious.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is like a procrastination tool that lots of founders in Europe use. Like I will start when I get to the valley.
100%.
And actually so we'll do a bit of a sidetrack and then I'll come back, I promise. But there's this film director, what was a film director, Sergio Leone. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if
Yeah.
you like
Yeah.
cowboy films as much as I do, but he born and raised in Italy, but he was obsessed with the Wild West, and he'd read like every book there was to read about the American Wild West. And he was also obsessed with film, and he was able to. He was just had this like huge ambition to make films. But he couldn't really he didn't speak any English. He had no links to the US, and he ended up working. So bear with, I promise. There's a conclusion to this story that's relevant. But he interned. He like assisted on the production of Ben-Hur, which was like one of the biggest films ever made in the 60s in Italy. And he was basically able to observe how that was made and take the parts of it that were really, really the most impactful. And then he was able to go away and make essentially the cowboy films that defined the American perception of the Wild West. But he made them with basically no budget, with an entirely Spanish crew, with an entirely Italian film crew, and like 1 or 2 actors from the US, like Clint Eastwood, he managed to get for no money at all because he was an up and coming actor. But Sergio Leone didn't speak a word of English when these films were made. For the first 3 films, he had never even visited the US, but he was able to achieve this enormous global ambition by having just like cherry picked the most valuable parts of like the American filmmaking process. But he just knew that he could do it in a different way. He could do it from within Europe without having gone to the US and followed their ways of doing things. And I think it's like I always have this as my little sort of like my little thing in my head of like what would Sergio Leone have done? He'd have like cherry picked the best, and he'd have like found ways of doing it with limited resources, but with also all the assets he had within Europe. So that is long winded, but he didn't procrastinate it. He didn't
Mm-hmm.
procrastinate. He got going. I think the things we should steal from San Francisco are, I mean, I think this culture of like work being everything. And when I say work being everything, I don't mean like, I think we have this European mentality that like the grind set is just like sitting at your desk from 9 until 8 p.m., just like heads down working, because that is how people work in European offices. Like
Mhm.
you come to work and you work. And so when you hear about like 996 culture and people working every day in the US, you think, shit, like they must be at their laptops the whole time, just like grinding through emails. They're not. Like work culture in SF could include, a hike with some friends, a coffee with someone who someone else has said you should talk to. On Sunday, you might have lunch with some other people who also happen to be founders. It's all work, and it is all like helpful to you as a founder, but it's not like sitting at your laptop grinding. In Europe, we have like a very clear separation between work and life. And I think like this is something that I see in all of the Project Europe founders. Like they want their work, they want their mission to be everything, and they want it to be everything for the people they're working with as well. And I think that fluidity of work and life is something that is like that SF just has absolutely in abundance.
Mhm.
This is a perfect bridge to our final question before we move to the rapid fire section. The motto of this podcast is how do you build a business while staying sane, right? And you personally, you are also moving super fast. You are traveling a lot, right? So let's talk about how you personally stay grounded. What helps you to stay sane whilst keeping up that momentum?
Very good question. I don't think I have a good answer because I don't think I stay all that sane. For me, the most useful thing is never having enough time to get comfortable doing anything. So I actually, for like home for me is in the countryside, like a small village, in the southwest of England. And I live in London Monday to Friday by myself, and I go home at the weekends. Although actually, I end up spending about 3 nights at home a month, which is like, I mean, it's incredibly tough. So I live like in London in the week. I live pretty much like single girl life with flatmates in a flat in London. And at the weekends, I go home to my boyfriend and my dog in a village in the countryside. But yeah, it kind of works because it's just like always, always on. Just like I never have enough time to feel comfortable. But if I take a week's holiday and I relax, like going back to work is like quite an overwhelming prospect because it's everything. It's all consuming. But I am more grown up than the founders I work with, and most of my friends aren't doing the kind of work I'm doing. And most of my friends have got no clue what I do for a living, which is actually quite nice because at the weekend you don't talk about work at all. But yeah, I mean, I think this is more of a coping mechanism than a way of staying sane. But like, yeah, just avoiding ever relaxing or getting comfortable, and just because then just the inertia cannot seep in.
So we could go on because especially on that point, like having also friends around you that have nothing to do with it, I think that's also one coping mechanism that served me very well. Let's finish our conversation with the rapid fire questions where we just ask you one question and then you take whatever short answer you have to it. A founder you met who completely changed how you think.
Probably Alex from actually the company's now called Spatial AI. Like just grew up in a total vacuum. It didn't know any other engineers, but was able to build robots that would challenge like the Tesla Optimus, completely by himself with basically no funding. I don't know. You kind of think you've seen everything, and you kind of think that I also had a high bar for what ambition was and what's the willingness to go after impossible things look like. But that really, really, really changed it for me.
A recent failure or near miss that taught you something big or meaningful?
I should have read these questions more thoroughly and thought about my answers.
No, that's the whole point.
Then the rapid fire could be a bit more rapid. And recent failure taught me something important. This is a really good question. For Project Europe investments, we have to always remain true to thesis. And recently, these aren't teams that we've invested in, but there have been a couple of teams we've spoken to that seem like a bit like more established further along, and they're trying to raise like bigger rounds. And actually, we exist to invest in people in the very, very earliest stages, to be their first believers, not to join bigger rounds further on. And I think that can be like a huge waste of our attention and energy. And it's not where we stand to be most helpful. And so I think that's been a super valuable thing.
The most European trait that secretly makes us great founders.
So this is an easy one. Europeans love making brilliant things. We're obsessed with like creation of wonderful, wonderful, wonderful things. Like if you go back like millennia, Europe has been defined by this kind of almost yearning to encounter the divine or the sublime through making wonderful things. And if you look at basically all scientific, industrial, whatever else, like everything is kind of based on some European innovation or some beautiful thing that Europe created. And I think we've recently become like dazzled by the idea of value capture and like the value extraction that you see in US entrepreneurship. And I think we've sort of almost forgotten that the thing we're so good at is creating wonderful things and like we need to get better at extracting capturing the value from them. But yeah, European traders just like not settling for making things which are anything less than brilliant.
One thing every ambitious 20-year-old in Europe should do this year.
Make more friends with other builders like them. I think community and network is super important. And actually, interestingly, I see in like smaller ecosystems, this happens more. I think if you're a builder in London, you think, oh my gosh, there's so much going on. It's kind of overwhelming. You'll go to these like diffuse events where you're not really going to find your like true people who you really, really click with. But if you look at so many different subcultures that have created wonderful things, they've often been like sort of small groups of people where people have got like slightly different types of like crazy energy, but they've ended up being like, okay, we're the two crazy ones here. Let's get together and work together. Because they've had no other options. And actually I see this like in the Baltics at the moment, there are loads of cool hacker houses popping up because smaller populations and people with any kind of like crazy ambition just end up having to come together. Whereas in like bigger cities, you can be like, right, I'm an ambitious person and I like these kind of technologies and I like these sectors. So I'll find like that group and you end up with like almost like, I don't know, you end up with like meetup groups that have like loads of things in common, but like they don't have the same like, core resonant frequency. Whereas in smaller ecosystems, people with the same resonant frequency, you may have like nothing in common on paper, end up like colliding and working together. And so just like make more friends with people who just vibe in the same way as you rather than have exactly the same interests as you.
And so perfect last segue into the last question, like how do people who are ambitious, who are crazy enough to kind of be bold and big thinkers, how do they find more information about you? How can they reach out to you and apply for Project Europe?
So Project Europe application is super easy, always on. We're always reviewing. So just apply through our website, which is www.projecteurope.co. Email me anytime, kitty@projecteurope.co. Don't try and contact me on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn inbox is it's a crime scene. It's not so much flooded. I just haven't tended to it for so long that it's like when you get these extreme hoarders who eventually just like shut the door on houses and move out. Like for me, that's what LinkedIn is. So yeah, email me and I'll reply.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kitty, for being on our show. I truly enjoyed the conversation and see you soon again here in Zurich or London.
It's been so fun. Thank you both so much. And yeah, well, we'll see you very soon, I'm sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And now we would love to hear from you. How did you like it? What should we improve? Do you have any suggestions, ideas, or dream podcast guests? Please let us know.
Thank you and see you again next week.